Welcome to Blowing Solutions Wide Open, where we're talking about all things spiritual, as well as creating new systems in the area of healthcare, finance, government, education, and new environmental practices. My name is Addie Halkin. If you think that you have ideas or things to share in any of the areas I just mentioned, please feel free to email blowingsolutionswideopen@gmail.com, or you could put the word guest in the comment section of this video. And I'd love to potentially talk to you and have you on this channel and have you share what you know with people. That's what this channel is about. It's about connecting and creating new solutions. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment, all those things if you want to see more content or you have an interest in getting alternative information out to more people. And so today I am very, very excited about my guest. I I just met her, but I honestly already consider her a friend. Um, Her name is Dana Hawes. Sorry, I just said the wrong name. We met through Dana. Her name is sorry about that.
That's
Xandra
okay.
Hawes. Xandra Hawes. And I am again, I apologize about that, but I'm super excited about her. And Let me just give you a little information on what she does. I think it's super cool. And she's a licensed therapist, psychic medium, and spiritual mentor with over 10 years of experience in the field of mental health and wellness. She is the founder of Soul Essence Center, a virtual platform that offers intuitive development, energy healing, and spiritual guidance to individuals and groups. Xander's approach to therapy and mentorship is holistic, combining evidence-based techniques with psychology, spiritual principles, and intuitive insights. She believes in empowering her clients to tap into her inner wisdom and connect with their soul's purpose, while also providing practical tools and strategies for navigating the challenges of everyday life. As a sensitive person herself, Xandra excels at teaching empathic people to manage their sensitivity and cultivate and trust their intuition. Xandra is also the host of Soul Essence Center, a podcast where she discusses mental health topics from spiritual and Buddhist psychology perspective. Um, love everything I read there, and I so appreciate you being on here. And I guess my first question for you would be, what kind of person, obviously sensitive, intuitive people are going to be attracted to you, but what other kind of people are attracted to you and what you're doing with your business?
That's a fair question. Yeah, yeah. Um, if I imagine all the meetings of all the humans that I met with this week, um, a lot of the folks that I see that are attracted to me are the people that when they hear the word soul essence, something pings in their space. Something goes, oh, like what does that mean? There's like a deeper resonance. And I get the seekers. I get the people that are like, there's more. Like, I know there's more. There's something else. I get the people that are the folks that want to turn over every stone or every rock. There's like deep exploration, there's deep challenge in the self. And so I get a lot of people that are willing to question or challenge what's happening. And I also get folks that are going through, I think pop culture would call it like a spiritual awakening or like a spiritual emergency where there's something that's difficult emotionally that happens, or there's a particular event that happens as like a catalyst. And all of a sudden, all of their reference points are gone about who they thought they were, what they believed in, what they liked. All of a sudden, all of that starts shifting. So I get folks that are ultimately, they may not have the language for it, but they're trying to come home to that greater essence inside of them. And it shows up that block of being able to do that in different ways. But ultimately, um, that's tend to see who's coming in. It's my seekers, the soul seekers, a lot of the time.
Yes, yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, so when it comes to your practice, would you say that people would you say that you are maybe like one of those people that I'm just trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here. Um, are you somebody who feels like you kind of challenge things, or you are maybe like an outsider and therefore that's a little bit of outsider is not the right term, but somebody who is living a life that is not necessarily the norm, and therefore you're getting people that are kind of on board with that.
I think outsider's perfect. I think I'm simultaneously an outsider and an insider all at the same time. Maybe you resonate with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like I'm outside a lot of traditional things, but it feels like I'm way more inside certain things than other people maybe are. And I think um, I tend to see myself and other people and even the world very multi-dimensionally. Um, so it's like I tend to see the deeper resonance in things and I tend to question a lot of things. One of my dear friends in high school painted a question mark on the back of his jacket that he wore everywhere as like this reminder for people to like question everything. And I've always thought about that of like, ah, good, yes, like I already had those people like in my life at that age, and I tend to be the person that holds a lot of information about a lot of different things. And I'm constantly standing back and saying, like, huh, okay, well, what does that look like from this angle? Or like, what does this look like? Um, and I tend to see a lot of people that are questioning a lot in our reality right now, from what we're told historically, from different systems of government to what we're taught about health and wellness. I see a lot of folks that are willing to stumble upon the unknown and are not afraid. I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of fear frequencies being put out to keep people in a cycle of suffering. And a lot of the folks that I see, um, it's interesting, are diagnosed with different things that are like, I see a lot of folks that are like star seeds or high level beings that are like diagnosed with ADHD. And they're like, I'm just like struggling to do all these things. And like, I'm unmotivated and I'm bad. And on the other end of the spectrum, I'm like, okay, well, let's figure out how to help you carve out a life where you want to do certain things. But at the same time, I'm holding the perspective like, yeah, isn't that garbage that we have to do that? I think that's a lot of wisdom that actually you're pushing against those systems and saying, like, why are we doing this? I keep seeing so many star seeds because I work with young folks as well that are pushing really hard against the school system around just like, how is this going to help me? And like, I'm not willing to just learn information to like regurgitate it back to you. I'm not here just to memorize things, which is like what previous generations were taught. Like, do this, memorize it, regurgitate it back, potentially remember it. And kids nowadays are saying, like, what's the meaning of this? Like, what's the purpose? So, went off on a little side stream there, but absolutely tend to be that person. And I tend to get people on all levels of their evolution of that, whether it's like the beginning of the spiritual awakening, and I have folks that have been meditators, practitioners, things like that, teachers, nurses, all across the board, people just waking up and starting to question the systems around us, rightly so.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. We need people like you to support that in people because uh the obviously there's a couple things going on in this world right now around staying in the same systems and actually really emerging into a different reality. And so thank you for what you're doing. I think it could not be more important. And one of the things that I would ask is, well, you kind of just answered it, but I would say, in regards to what you're doing, or if you have other ideas, separate from what you're doing around changing the systems. Um, and what do you have ideas? Do you have your own ideas around things that you think would change some of those systems that we're talking about, whether it be the education system or um, finance, government, all those things?
Mm-hmm. Man, I mean, from my corner of the world, right, where I'm like deep in like the emotions of
Right.
people and I see how all these systems impact people. The core thing, or at least my mission, as far as I know in this chapter right now, it changes, every few years. But as far as I can sense or see in the right now, so many of the systems are upheld truly just by the frequency of fear. There is such a fear somehow of coming home to ourselves and coming home to our intuition to the point where most of the time when people are opening to this intuition or how to guide themselves based off of this deeper knowing outside of governmental structures, right? When they're asking the I, not the ego I, but like the bigger I am sort of presence that we have versus just being told what to do, is people start asking themselves, well, what if I'm crazy? Like, what if I'm making it up? There's such an intense energy about people not trusting their inherent wisdom. And I think that our inherent wisdom, and this is from a Buddhist perspective, because I come from a Buddhist psychology background, is that rarely is someone on their first life. And so we have so much wisdom. We have lived through so many things, learned so much from the galactic perspective. This is very few people's first life on Earth. Like they've been lots of other places. So again, this brings in quite a galactic experience, but for some reason, people are so afraid to touch in and go into these like vibrationally high, loving places where there's so much wisdom and intuition that the soul has imprinted on it that could really help guide us out of some of these systems that are created from fear. And so I believe we have this like portal, this encyclopedia of wisdom inside of us about how to change these systems. But a lot of times the systems require us to stay in fear. I remember when I graduated from undergrad, I was studying like family social science and social justice. And, the question was like, do you work against the system or do you work inside the system to change the system? And I was like, really like, okay, am I going to work outside and like be a labor organizer? Am I going to be, doing this and protesting this? Like, what am I going to do? And then I was working in like charter schools and alternative education. And eventually I realized whether I tried to work inside the system or outside the system, there was so much grief. There was so much grief. And I actually, there was a time in my life where I was like, I need to leave society behind and I'm going to like live in the Renaissance Festival and I'm just going to travel around the country and live in a tent. But then I realized I went there and met these magical people and they were all still so reliant on Walmart for everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is like even more like entangled in the grid. Um, and so I tried so hard to get around it, inside, outside of it, try to learn all the things, watch all the videos, be really educated, use the right language, dated lots of people that were like working for the attorney general or working for different systems, like trying to help people in the political sphere. And there's always this frequency of trying to change the systems while working at the frequency that the systems are created on. And I was like, it's not working. If we come home to our own energy and we come home to this home inside of us, there's a lighthouse, there's a resonance, there's ideas, there's a whole way of operating and creating new systems that are completely on a different vibrational frequency and they exist outside of this earth plane. And so if you have memories of those things and experiences, you can apply them in the same way that the more time you spend on earth, you have typically more wisdom. You can see when people are struggling, like, oh, I've been through that. That's how you do this. Imagine if we had access to those things to be like, oh, I remember that life when we worked through this. This is what we did. But it's like we are so afraid to go in, to open those things up, to be fearful of our own intuition. Like, and we're taught that, and that is programmed into us, arguably from birth, from everything being shown to us. And most star seeds are folks that are coming in with that higher awareness. Very few actually have the parenting support to offer that evolution or space. So, this from my corner of the world, um, there's a lot of folks way more educated on like what those systems could look like, but mine comes from a sense of helping people come home so that what's already there, that like wisdom can just be accessed so that people aren't working so hard. They're just reclaiming what's already there.
Ah, you are giving me chills. That could not have been a better answer. Um, and I feel like I need to hear that sometimes because um it's really easy to get kind of caught up in, okay, what do we do now? How do we change this? But you're right. It starts within. The information is there for us. We don't necessarily have to try so hard, and oftentimes when we do, especially within the systems, it doesn't work because of that frequency. Um, and that's why I think that you're spot on because ultimately a lot of people are talking about just fixing the systems, but from my perspective, and I from what you're saying from your perspective, I don't think that's going to work. I think it has to come from walking away and creating something new. And you brought up an incredible point that we have that kind of information from non-physical or from past experiences, as you've said, in other lifetimes or whatever. Um, so wow, that's just that kind of answer makes somebody really stop and realize we don't have to try so hard. We have to go within. Um, and so, yeah, thank you for that answer. Um, what else? What else is it that you do with people? Obviously, you're making a huge difference. And I think that somebody like you is one of the best kind of people anybody could ever work with. What else do you want to say about what you're doing with your business and people?
I mean, I will say I'm with you. It's hard when you see systems not working to want to like go out and sometimes like if you even take systems that have broken down, right, with the hurricane that happened in like Asheville and some of those places, right? Like you have on the proof like on the ground of like sometimes we need boots on the ground,
Right.
like people to like come in. But I have folks that are in those areas and I'm in contact with them on a daily basis about how do we hold a higher resonance in all of this? How do we be tender? Like, how do we stay open? How do we work together? Like, how do we resource and ground into one another? There's like this internalized capitalism that like most people have around like competition and this idea that we need to like individuate in order to um like thrive. And I just, from everything that we know historically on this planet, like we've lived in communities and groups and we've healed things together and we've worked together. And that is like the fastest route. So it's hard when I talk to my folks that are like organizers or in social systems because they can feel the brokenness and there becomes this cycle of like, what do we do here? Or what do we do there? Or like, how do we strategize here? And what I see is there's just like immense depletion that starts to happen if you're not plugged in to some of these bigger, higher frequency concepts so that you're being fed your deep intuitive knowing about how to handle things or how to stay in the eye of the storm, when you're in those places. And I have to do that in my work as a therapist too, because I see people unraveling these knots, right? These like painful knots or these like painful stories of limitation that people have been taught or our society has reflected back to them about how they identify and who they are. And none of it's actually true. But people have to be willing to go in and through the body with those things. A lot of spiritual practices sometimes are about like navigating away from the body, but I really see it as like in and through, like how can we have the body and spirit match? And I know we talked about this a little bit too, but it can be so difficult to help the body come into alignment. And a lot of star seeds, a lot of light workers come in with this big resonance and then they come into the earth plane that has so much density, right? And has a lot of chemicals, it has a lot of like, man, it's like I'm doing my own research just on like how much the thyroid itself that regulates our hormones is impacted by environmental toxins. It's just insane what sometimes we're up against as like we're trying to help heal the world. And there's so much corruption, you would call it. But I feel like at the core, like light just means information, and darkness is just a lack of information. And so the more that we can plug into the light, the more we're plugging into higher resonance of information. And so when I see people doing things to hurt other people or the earth or whatever industry, right? It could be person to person, or it could be, in some of these big, huge infrastructure, governmental things, and there's structures way above governmental stuff that we're not even aware of, right? But it's like I look at it as like they actually have a lack of information because light is always underestimated. But you'll notice in like projects or structures that are like not good, people don't have all the information. Like if you look at certain um like militaristic projects, and you were eventually to like uncover it, the people that are part of the project, no one's given the full project. Everyone just has these little pieces that we're working on. Everyone lacks information about what the entire structure is, like what it's doing, versus light is how do we involve everyone? How do we get everyone's ideas and answers? Like, how do we hear your wisdom out versus things that are lower frequency or in darkness are a separation of information. And so when we look at certain systems, we actually have a benefit of getting everyone involved. If everyone's holding a lighthouse in themselves, we have quadruple the times of information and light versus these other structures are isolating people to create profit or a mission. And they don't tell, very few people have all the parts or the information about what's working and how it's going. So there's also ways that light is very underestimated as people can't have all the information because they won't be able to handle it or work with it. And I think that's really changing. Our nervous systems are adapting to hold more light and to hold more information and resonance, which is why I think so many folks are going through a spiritual awakening. So again, that's also part of the practice that I'm sort of in with people is watching people's nervous systems be able to hold more information, be able to hold more light. And it's really important when you're a sensitive, empathic person to keep plugging in to higher and higher information in yourself because darkness, right? Or the depression of information is actually what's causing some of these structures to continue on or these systems to continue on. But most people in those systems don't even have all the information. And so there's confusion, there's lack of consciousness, those sorts of pieces. So again, I see all of this in my work. I see people that are, part of, I can't like say it because of privacy, but are like pushing forward systems they're not even aware of because they're not given what the result is of the information that they're contributing to. They just think they're doing science work and really like they're creating bombs and don't even realize structures and things like that. That's just an example, but right. So went off on a little bit of like a tangent there, but this is sort of as a therapist what I see in this like battle for creating health and wellness and higher light systems is like that's the benefit if we can hold that concept together is that together we have more light, we have more information, and if everyone does their part and goes into themselves and is able to uncover that in themselves, we're unstoppable. Like we're literally unstoppable.
That is beautiful, and I've never thought of it that way. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like when this is why the light always in the end ultimately wins out because in the dark, by people only having a certain amount of information, it creates holes in the system. That is incredible. And it actually gives me a lot of hope. I love what you're saying there. And keep telling people this. And I was wondering, do you have some kind of stories about some of your intuitive experiences, some of your spiritual experiences, whether it be through meditation or through I know that you're a huge channeler. I know that you get a lot of information. And I know that even just in the little bit of time that I've spent with you, we've talked about how you know how to cross over souls, um, things that are just really helpful to this world. So if you want to kind of talk a little bit about some of your personal experiences with that, we have maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. Oh, um, oops. Oh, shoot. Are you there? Sorry. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened with my computer there, but yeah. Yeah, any stories you want to give us? I'm going to take advantage of this because you're kind of a wealth of information.
Um, I think, I mean, there's so many stories. I'm just seeing what like shoots
Comes
up
to
into
you.
my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of the work that I feel like I do, right? And in a nutshell, the mission, and most of us here that are helpers, healers, light workers, star seeds, right? You're one of them too. Like the goal is to help people wake up
Yeah.
to who they already are, who they've always been, and to help them figure out how to bring that energy fully onto the earth plane and help the earth and help our people like evolve, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of my stories came at really beautiful times around doubt because I think that's the biggest human emotion that I see that stops us. It's a combination of fear and doubt most of the time. And I think when folks are trying to come home to the soul essence, to the self, Buddhists call it basic goodness or brilliant sanity. When we're trying to like come home to that energy, naturally fear and doubt are going to be the biggest things that arise. And they cycle back around because they come in layers, right? Of like, how much can I trust myself? I don't feel like trust is like, a solid thing. It's like a glass of water. It's like, oh, cool. We got to halfway around trust and we got to 75. But as we go through life, we get challenges that we make it through. And then that usually gives us kind of like organic trust in ourselves, right? Like when we can't do something, we think back. And if we've had more life, we can go, oh, I got through that. I can probably get through this, right? There's just general ways that we trust. But it's different in some ways when we're coming home to our soul essence because we are going towards something that is not this concrete goal and it has a lot of different paths, which is why you have so many different spiritual practices. And I think they resonate with people depending on their past lives. I think sometimes people are drawn to things that they've done before. And I think sometimes people are like, I've already kind of done that. Like I've already kind of been in that. And so in my process of becoming a therapist, um, and also working in the psychic medium realm for a long time, I really separated them. And I do a lot less psychic medium work now because I'm so much more interested on like teaching people how to find their answers versus just like providing. Um, but when I was in the fear doubt space, a lot of tests started to happen, a lot of them. And one of them, one of the most potent experiences, my office is in like South Boulder, and there's a black raven feather, like a mold basically of one that's like 2 feet long. It's huge and it's broken. The whole stem of it is broken and it's broken on purpose, I feel like, from the universe. Because when I was studying a lot of like earth based traditions, I was learning about like how do you connect with the land and the spirits and the elementals and how do you cross people over? It's called psychopumping. Like, how do you, I can see them, I can sense them. How do I stop being afraid and actually be a benefit here? And one of the classes I was taking was a soul retrieval class. And what that is essentially is psychology um, calls like traumatic incidences ways like we dissociate basically. So if like a traumatic experience happens, we can dissociate. We can sort of like our attention sort of leaves the body. But in like the spiritual realm, they call that soul loss. And that when something traumatic really happens, almost like the soul again is in like a glass of water, a little bit is like poured out, a little bit of that soul piece like gets lost. And so a soul retrieval is a way of helping someone who's lost or feels like a part of them is missing. It's doing an entire ceremony about journeying through the realms and finding that peace and lovingly bringing it back and listening to that peace and asking, like, what do you need to stay integrated in the body so that this person has all of their energy to heal themselves? And so I was learning how to do this, and we had to do a journey, um, basically about the tool we were going to use. And she was like, yeah, just bring a few things. And she said, usually it's a clear quartz crystal. So I'm like on a trip to Wyoming the weekend before, and I find this like beautiful, magical, perfect crystal. And I'm like, great, it's going to be perfect. And I do the journey with the crystal, and my guides I journey with were like, nope, it's not it. And I was like, what? It's like the most beautiful crystal, because spiritual materialism. I'm like, this crystal is the perfect mirror to how powerful I am as a healer. Like this is like, I love the ego. It's just so great at like taking spirituality and like kind of gobbling it, like my precious, my thing. So I'm like, I do the journey. I'm like super disappointed. And it's like, you're going to need a feather. And I was like, all right, not as cool, but I can handle it. And my teacher is like, oh, I have all of these feathers. And she pulls these feathers out of the freezer. She's like, what about this one? What about this one? None of them. And my guides are like, go for a walk when you get home and you're going to find the feather on the ground. And I'm like, okay, kind of risky, but sure, we'll do that. Right. And I was still learning how to listen to that voice and trust that I'm not making it up, that I'm not crazy. And I lived near a lake there in Boulder. And I like took a whole lap around the lake, and my heart just started dropping as I was like walking back. And I was like, wow, there's like no feather. Like, I'm crazy. I'm not supposed to do this. Like, I had this whole internal doubt, fear. What am I doing? Maybe I'm not enough. Like, maybe other people are better healers. Maybe I'm not special. All that shit, all of that fear, right? Was coming through. And then right as I was walking home, I heard a voice say, take the long way. And there's a way that you kind of go off the path and kind of go around. And as I was walking this path, I could feel this energy building in my like spirit. And I was like, I felt this like tingling, kind of like when you can like feel like an opening kind of in your energy field. And I like round the corner, and all of a sudden I see it. And it is just the most disgusting feather I've ever seen. Just so gross, like just covered in mud, caked, completely broken. It's like a foot long big crow feather, just completely broken. And I was like, are you, that's so gross. Why would someone's like precious soul energy? Like, why would I do that? And so I got home that night in tears and journeyed with it. And my guide was like, this is a huge lesson on spiritual materialism. This is a huge lesson that, like, it is not the object, it is the energy and the reverence that you bring to it. This is huge. And so I showed up to my class the next day and I told them the story, and they all laughed. And this really brilliant man looked at me and he goes, you know what? I think your first book's going to be called Broken Feather. And I have kept that bullet or that breadcrumb in my brain. And I bought this black feather from this place to remind me, and I put in my car and it immediately broke. And so it hangs on the wall in my office. And some people will comment and be like, oh, is your feather broken? And I was like, yep, it is, because it's the reminder to see through the illusion. It's the reminder to see through what we think things are and to always question, but to know that it's like, it's not the objects. It's not what we're seeing in front of us. It's our deep inner space and wisdom and reverence and ability to hold energy and light that allows those things to happen. They're just tools. And just because something's broken and muddy doesn't mean it's not super valuable. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. I will say, and I know I took a lot of time up there, but you can kind of feel the energy of
Oh yeah.
like the doubt
That's
part of it.
that's beautiful. And I can't wait to see that book when it comes. Um, so yeah, so we have just a couple minutes and I just want to make sure that I get out the information on you. I'm going to put your website in the description and the comments of this video. And also just to be clear, you are somebody that works remotely with people, right?
I am. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. It would be a shame if you didn't, because I mean, I'm glad to have you in Colorado, but man, everybody needs you. So, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming on here. You should speak. You're a beautiful speaker. I appreciate everything you're doing. I feel super grateful to have you in my life and I look forward to more friendships. Come back anytime you want and love what you're doing. Anyone in Boulder, Colorado, or anywhere around Boulder, Colorado is very lucky. Take
Hmm.
advantage of